Howard Ellison, a janitor at Morningside Tech in Mesa, Arizona, was a model of quiet for 20 years. Despite working non-stop from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. every night, he was never seen or acknowledged. People knew him only as an integral part of the company, the tired man who silently pushed a cleaning cart through the hallways, wiped windows, and swept the office before the company opened for the day. No one knew his real name, and some didn't even recognize his name as Howard, calling him Howie or nothing at all. They laughed behind his back, hurling rude comments, unaware that the person they were mocking was watching. Once, a manager deliberately spilled coffee on the floor and blamed Howard for making a mess, while he quietly cleaned it up without a word of protest. These jokes, these contemptuous looks, did not deter him. Howard never complained, nor did he resist. He just did his job carefully, precisely, and patiently. Even though he was treated badly, he did not care. Howard's silence was not submission, but acceptance and focus on the job. Instead of reacting to contempt, Howard chose to listen and observe the little things that others missed. What people did not know was that, all this time, Howard had been taking it all in. He listened to the conversations in the boardroom, paying attention to how the leaders treated each other, and especially him. But Howard did not react hastily. He knew that true power comes from observing, listening, and remaining calm. Everything has its time, and Howard understood that. Perhaps one day, those who had looked down on him would have to realize that he was the one who held the power. Howard Ellison is not just a janitor. He is also a smart and energetic man. Although he works as a cleaner day and night, no one knows that Howard has a wealth of knowledge and experience in his head. He is not a CEO or a Harvard graduate, but he is a person who builds practical things with his hands. Ever since he was a boy, Howard loved to disassemble electronic devices. To understand how they work, he always wanted to understand the nature of everything around him, whether it was old radios or more complex machines. Life has not been easy for Howard. A failed investment, a trusted relative who ran away with all his money, and a son he has not seen for 14 years. These shocks have made Howard quiet, but they have also motivated him to be patient and focused on his work. He did not complain, did not share his sorrows, but quietly continued with the cleaning work every day. Early in the morning, when everyone was still busy with work, Howard had finished a hard night's work. But the important thing is, even though he did not speak, Howard was the one who always paid attention to everything. He observed everything, not only how people treated him but also how they behaved with each other, how they communicated, worked, and the habits that they did not notice. During that time, Howard did not miss any small details. He was the one who always listened and remembered, not only the stories behind closed doors but also the smallest details that many people never noticed. And it was this subtle observation that created a solid foundation for the next steps in Howard's plan. After a long period of working in silence, Howard Ellison began to notice the shortcomings in the way Morningside operated. Although everyone around him saw him as an anonymous janitor, Howard never let himself be forgotten. He paid attention to every little detail in the company, ineffective meetings, incomplete strategies, and especially the middle managers who lacked sophistication and leadership. Howard not only observed but also recorded everything. The incomplete numbers on the whiteboard, the forgotten documents, or the hasty conversations between leaders. Each piece of the puzzle gradually created a bigger picture, helping Howard realize that the company was not really effective and was gradually leaking opportunities. Howard was not always aware of the changes he was about to make, but he knew that something needed to change. What he observed over the years were not the big mistakes but the small, seemingly insignificant omissions that created a rift in the system. He began to look at the overlooked financial numbers, the outdated strategic plans, and the small flaws in leadership and communication between departments. Time gave Howard patience, a quality he considered most important in the process of observing and learning. He knew that changing such a large system could not be rushed. Even though the company was profitable, Howard knew that the existence of small mistakes would make the system unsustainable. He began to envision a different future for Morningside, where attention to detail and the value of each employee were the top priorities. What Howard never lost sight of was the ability to make small changes that could make a big difference. One day, while Howard was doing his usual cleaning job, a fortuitous event changed everything. While he was cleaning the middle management conference room, a small accident occurred. Howard's bucket caught the corner of the door and soapy water splashed onto the floor, soaking the entire area in front of the group of managers. Soon, laughter and jeers rang out. "Jesus, Howie, can you not ruin the floor again?" Gil Brandon, a VP, laughed loudly. "This is why we outsource cleaning." Gil continued, waving his hand at Howard, as if he were invisible. Howard did not react, still quietly took a paper towel and continued his work, despite the mocking looks from those around him. However, this time, something in Howard changed. He had heard these words too many times. But this time, it was no longer simply mockery. It was a moment of awakening. A small shock that made him realize that not only the cleaning work but everything he had been doing silently for the past 20 years was being undervalued and overlooked. Respect comes not only from recognition, but also from how people perceive each other. Howard wrote the name Brandon in his small notebook and felt the anger simmering inside. That was the moment he decided that everything had to change. That moment marked a drastic shift in Howard's plan. He was no longer a person who worked in silence, no longer someone who could be easily overlooked. With each step, Howard became more decisive. From that day on, the patience he had practiced over the years was not just passive waiting, but a preparation to accumulate the capacity and opportunity to create change. Anyone, especially Gil Brandon, will soon realize that the person they have despised for so long will be the one to change everything. After the little incident in the boardroom, Howard Ellison no longer saw his work the same way. Although Morningside continued to operate, still profitable and expanding, Howard decided that it was time for him to start acting differently. He was no longer just a janitor, but he was now seeing more clearly than ever the opportunity to change the system that had been in place for too long. He took notes in his notebook, not only about the numbers he had observed, but also about the missed opportunities, the shortcomings that no one had noticed. With each passing day, Howard began to have a clearer plan of how he would enter the world of those who had once considered him invisible. But Howard did not act hastily. He remembered the lessons of his past failures. Once, he had acted too quickly when investing in a transportation business, and as a result, he had lost everything. But this time, he would not rush. He had learned to move slowly and steadily, because only then could small steps create big changes. Howard began to quietly buy shares in Morningside through a subsidiary, discreetly, without anyone noticing. Each time he owned a small portion of shares, he felt like he was gradually rebuilding what had previously been overlooked. Meanwhile, everyone in the company continued their daily lives. They did not realize that a revolution was quietly taking place right before their eyes. Howard knew that if he continued to maintain this patience, each small step would help him achieve his big goal. Each share, each opportunity, he saw as part of a long-term plan, although there were times when he wondered if this was really possible. Just remembering the moment when Gil Brandon and the others had mocked him made Howard even more determined in his determination to carry out his plan. As Howard Ellison began to take action, he knew he needed to change pace and move faster. No longer a shadow janitor, he now had a clear goal. After quietly building his stake in the company, a fortuitous event pushed Howard to a turning point he could not ignore. One night, as Howard was cleaning the break room, two young marketing employees walked in, laughing, unaware that Howard was standing right behind them. One of them, upon seeing Howard's old shoes, sneered and said, "He has nothing, not even a bank account. He must be paid in pennies." These words did not hurt Howard in the way one might think, but they did wake him up. The feeling of being looked down upon, of being undervalued, flared up again. This time, it was not simply disrespect, but a wake-up call. He couldn't just stand by and watch life pass by without doing anything. He hadn't just worked hard. He had observed everything, memorized the important details. But the real change came when he realized that it wasn't just money or power. It was respect and recognition that mattered most. That day, after everyone had left the company, Howard didn't continue his work as usual. He sat quietly in a corner of the room, thinking about everything that had happened during the past time. He felt himself boiling with determination. If not now, then when? Howard called his old friend Clarence Boone and told him he was ready to speed up the plan. "We're going to speed up," Howard said, his voice full of determination. Clarence, though still skeptical, couldn't deny the determination in Howard's voice. And so the plan was accelerated. He didn't want to wait any longer, because this time Howard not only wanted to change his life, but also wanted to change the world that he had been forgotten about for so many years. As Howard Ellison began to take action, he knew he needed to change pace and move faster. No longer a shadow janitor, he now had a clear goal. After quietly building his stake in the company, a fortuitous event pushed Howard to a turning point he could not ignore. One night, as Howard was cleaning the break room, two young marketing employees walked in, laughing, unaware that Howard was standing right behind them. One of them, upon seeing Howard's old shoes, sneered and said, "He has nothing, not even a bank account. He must be paid in pennies." These words did not hurt Howard in the way one might think. But they did wake him up. The feeling of being looked down upon, of being undervalued, flared up again. This time, it was not simply disrespect, but a wake-up call. He couldn't just stand by and watch life pass by without doing anything. He hadn't just worked hard. He had observed everything, memorized the important details. But the real change came when he realized that it wasn't just money or power. It was respect and recognition that mattered most. That day, after everyone had left the company, Howard didn't continue his work as usual. He sat quietly in a corner of the room, thinking about everything that had happened during the past time. He felt himself boiling with determination. If not now, then when? Howard called his old friend Clarence Boone and told him he was ready to speed up the plan. "We're going to speed up," Howard said, his voice full of determination. Clarence, though still skeptical, couldn't deny the determination in Howard's voice. And so the plan was accelerated. He didn't want to wait any longer. Because this time Howard not only wanted to change his life, but also wanted to change the world that he had been forgotten about for so many years. Under Howard Ellison's leadership, Morningside Tech began to change. The change did not come through big decisions or flashy strategies, but through small, slow, steady actions. Howard did not need to hold big meetings or make big moves to prove himself. He did things quietly, but effectively. One of the first changes Howard made was to create a more respectful and fair work environment. Employees who had previously been overlooked and underappreciated now had the opportunity to be properly recognized. Employees across the company began to notice the difference. Managers who had previously been isolated from lower-level employees began to eat lunch together, interact with everyone, and show respect for the people who had previously been overlooked. Howard also made a small but powerful reform. The janitors were paid 20% more than they had ever been before. And they were no longer anonymous people doing menial work, but people who were valued and recognized. During this time, Howard began holding small meetings to listen to each employee's story, encouraging them to share their ideas and feelings. Every contribution was respected and taken seriously. Never before in Morningside's history had there been such a harmonious and creative atmosphere. Departments that had previously operated as separate islands began to communicate, exchange and collaborate with each other. One thing Howard constantly emphasized was fairness in promotions. He saw many talented employees who had never been given the opportunity to show their talent. So Howard decided to promote employees like Roy Chen, who had run the cleaning department for years without being properly recognized. Howard believed that everyone had value and that everyone deserved a chance to grow. Gradually, the atmosphere within the company changed. Departments began to emphasize more open communication, respect for one another, and embracing differences as an advantage. This atmosphere not only helped Morningside grow, but also made everyone feel like they were an important part of the organization. And in this change, Howard never had to yell or criticize. He just had to do the right thing, be patient, and show people that respect was the highest value he aspired to. With all the changes that Howard Ellison brought to Morningside, he felt that the change was not only in the organization, but also in himself. After implementing reforms, increasing respect within the company, and creating opportunities for employees who had never been recognized, Howard began to feel that his journey at Morningside was complete. He was not a person who liked attention or wanted to be honored. But what he did left a big mark on people. Howard did not need to be forceful or ask for recognition, because the results were clear in the way the company began to change. Although he had accomplished his goal of creating an environment of fairness and respect, Howard did not stop there. He knew that a company could not grow sustainably by relying on cosmetic changes alone. Howard decided to pass the baton to those who were worthy to take over. Leah Armstrong, one of Howard's trusted former employees, was his choice to take on the leadership role. Leah had always been a quiet worker, never asking for attention or recognition. She was the epitome of hard work but often overlooked. And Howard saw a bright future for Morningside in her. Howard had done everything he could to hand over the reins to Leah. He believed that the change he had created would not only continue but grow stronger under her leadership. There was no big farewell ceremony, no public thanks from the company. Howard simply left quietly, as he had done for the past 20 years. He did not need recognition. Just seeing the change he had initiated was enough. Howard had succeeded in building a better company culture, and now it was time for him to step aside, letting others continue the journey he had started. Howard Ellison never sought glory or attention, but the change he made at Morningside Tech left an indelible mark. After handing over the reins to Leah Armstrong, he left the company without a farewell ceremony or accolades. He left quietly, just as he had for the past 20 years, quietly, humbly, and never seeking attention. Yet the change Howard initiated was not just about making the company better, but also a great lesson in humility, in recognizing and respecting the value of each person, whether they were a janitor or a leader. Howard never intended to be in the spotlight, but his silence spoke volumes. He knew that true value is not in titles or external recognition, but in actual change in the way people treat each other. And it was this change that made Howard feel satisfied, even though he never asked for thanks or recognition. What Howard wanted was a new generation of Morningside, where everyone was treated equally and with respect, and where fairness and dignity were indispensable values. When he left, Howard did not feel angry or regretful. He only felt peace in his soul, knowing that he had completed his mission. His life was no longer about waiting, no longer about long nights with the cleaning cart. He moved to a simpler life, teaching children, participating in community activities that he had never had time for before. The people around him never knew about Howard's past, and he did not need him to know, because for him, value was not fame, but how he lived, worked, and changed the world of which he was a small part.